Hi everyone, welcome to FilmDirt. Let's have a chat about an absolute classic released in 1990. It's Total Recall. Even though it's released in 1990, I still consider it an 80s film because it was filmed in the 80s and things seem to take a lot longer to come out back then. This film is almost the quintessential 80s film and it still has a lot of really 80s sensibilities and it's just one of those films that I see as stereotypical 80s where it's just completely over the top and there's so much violence and all of those fantastic model effects throughout the film and all that very dated looking composited shots where you can see all the glorious matte lines around everyone. It is just fantastic and it's an assault on the eyes. And what do we think of good old Arnold? This is probably one of his best, and certainly around the 90s when he was making one or two slightly dodgy films. They weren't really received too well. This one was really received. Adapted from a Philip K. Dick story, so you know you're getting a wonderful spiraling is it real or is it not real? That type of scenario. I never really got into Philip K. Dick stories. Kind of bypassed us at school. I don't recall ever being asked to read anything from him. It was afterwards when a friend of mine got me into reading a book which covered more than one Philip K. Dick story. And I was quite intrigued because I got into Blade Runner quite a bit, even though I didn't really understand the film. I loved the film. I thought it was very compelling. I didn't quite understand the story. And the more I got into reading adaptations of his original story, it just made me more confused. I wonder if I was the only one or not. But I can appreciate how fantastic they are and so compelling. I do plan to cover Blade Runner in a future review. Be sure to join me then. And if we love Total Recall, I'm sure we also love RoboCop and Starship Troopers as well. I think all three of those films, that is a testament to Paul Verhoeven's directing ability, isn't it? And I love that now that I've revisited this film after so long, I'm starting to see familiar faces pop up from RoboCop and then Starship Troopers. Yeah, a lot of familiar faces in the supporting cast. I think that's always good to see. Like a small gang is just moving from film to film. It's almost like a group of friends just getting together to make a film. And you also see familiar faces in a lot of Clint Eastwood's movies, and that always amuses me. I just think it's great to use the same people that you've used before. So I touched on the fantastic model effects and all the composited shots that I don't think aged very well. A lot of the models here don't really look like how they should look, and it helps that the whole film is just, to me, it's just all grotesque, isn't it? There's a lot of alien mutants here, and it's just revolting almost, isn't it? But I accept it's all fantastic work. But I think it was all just in your face for the sake of it. And this is probably the film of those three from Paul Verhoeven that I enjoyed the least. I thought RoboCop and Starship Troopers were absolutely fantastic films. I've reviewed RoboCop already on this channel, and I'm going to definitely review Starship Troopers and its not so great sequels sometime soon as well. So, what do we think happened to Arnold's character, Doug Quaid? Was he in the real world, or was he in the make-believe world as part of this ride? Personally, I think he was in the make-believe world and it was all just a dream. And I love that they did leave it ambiguous, but there was a few things throughout the film I noticed that just sort of pinched you to tell you, look, this is not real. I think one of them was the bead of sweat that ran down the face of that guy that came into his apartment. And the fact that a lot of the people he met on Mars were just so ridiculous, it did almost seem like a theme park ride, didn't it? And there was other few instances where he kind of had to check himself and kind of step back, and he had to do that in the film, didn't he? A couple of times where he was just contemplating what's real and what isn't. I just think he was possibly aware that it was all make-believe, but he was just pressing ahead with it. Now, I don't go to theme parks much, but when I go with the kids, that's the part of that world that I do enjoy just as much as my kids, I guess, where you stand in line for what seems like an hour, and you get into the ride and you put a headset on, or they strap you into something and you take off somewhere and you're looking at a giant screen, and it seems to envelope you, doesn't it? I remember back in the day I did the Terminator 2 ride at Universal Studios, and that blew hot and cold air in your face, and it really surprisingly took you into the story and how easy it was to do that. And then you get released back into the gift shop, and you take a step out into the open air and you're blinded by the sunlight and you're all back to normal, back to earth. And that's what this film reminded me of. It's good times, even though he didn't seem to do, even though Quaid didn't seem to enjoy it at all, did he? Now, possibly, even though I think it was make-believe, I think it took him a little bit harder than it should have, and possibly made him a little bit crazy. But that's for each of us to have our own opinions on, isn't it? Maybe one day I'll read up again on Philip K. Dick and see if I can make any sense of where he was going with that. And I just wanted to touch on the music. The fantastic score by Jerry Goldsmith, very similar to another Arnold film, Conan the Barbarian. If you listen to the two themes, there's some striking similarities, and I love both themes. That score was done by Basil Polidouris, who of course Paul Verhoeven has used before and is a fantastic composer, and this one for Total Recall by Jerry Goldsmith is absolutely fantastic as well. You can almost listen to it on its own as well, and it's a fantastic action theme. So it's time to give it a score. I'm going to give it 4 stars. I really loved this film, even though it was really too in your face, and I enjoyed it the least of the 3 major action films from Paul Verhoeven. It was still great to revisit this again. Now, I think Verhoeven's retired now, and that's a shame, isn't it? When your heroes retire and you realise they're not going to make any films like this, even though a lot of time has passed, it's enough to make you depressed, isn't it? Us fans of cinema really want to see fun movies. There's a time and a place for this, and they're almost a product of a bygone era that very rarely get repeated. And that brings me on to the remake starring Colin Farrell, and that came out in 2012, I believe. I do have the film, and I'll bring you my thoughts on that as well in my next video. It would be great to have you join me then. Thanks a lot for listening to this review of the original Total Recall, and to leave you with a little bit about myself. I love to talk about movies, both new and old, and when I review new movies in particular, I'm not swayed by any of the studio's directives or mandates, or no free tickets or any of those other bribes like some other channels do. You only get an honest and unbiased opinion from me. Thanks again for joining me. It was great to reminisce about this classic, and I'd love you to join me again soon. All the best, take care.